So if you're an outdoor living contractor or pool builder, then this video will be very relevant to you because I'm going to break down in exact detail how I booked 35 appointments in under 3 weeks for just $20 a pop. And so if you look at this screenshot, this was just something that I shared on my Instagram a while back. You can see that I spent $700, booked 35 of those appointments. You can see invitee meeting scheduled. And so it's not phone calls where people have to plug in your number and then like call you. It's actual scheduled appointments on the calendar. And it's a little bit cut off here, but you can see that it says July 1st, and then I think it's like July 15th or like 17th or something like that. And so a little bit under 3 weeks, and cost per result right there, $20. And this actually led to 9 closed jobs as well. And so I'm going to break down all of the details and also talk about just the mistakes that I made during this launch so that you can learn from them too. Because again, this was like 2 years ago, 2024. And so there are a ton of things that I would have done differently today. And if I did, then I would have gotten him just way better results. But before diving right into it, I just want to give a little disclaimer here. And it's that you probably will not see these types of results. I'm not gonna sit here and say you're guaranteed to make these results just because you watched a YouTube video. I just want to walk through what actually worked for me and the people that I worked with. Okay, so diving right into it, here was basically the setup. So this was a business that already actually had a pretty good sized audience in terms of like their customer list, their social media following and stuff. And they sold high ticket services just like you. And they were going to do a launch for one of their services, basically like a promotion, right? And I was responsible for planning and executing this little launch strategy. And here is what I did. And so step number 1, I had to figure out what the actual offer would be. And I'm not talking about figuring out what the service should be. A service or a product is not an offer. An offer is how you're actually going to package it. So it's a big difference there. But in order to actually come up with an offer, I needed to know who the ideal client actually was. And so I had to interview my client a little bit and go through some of his testimonials to really find out who had not only bought in the past, especially in the sort of same ticket range, like similar services and stuff, but the people that also got the best experience, the best results. That's very important to actually figure out, because you don't want to create like offers or messaging around clients that you don't want. You want to research and create around who you actually want to attract. And so if you think about this yourself, who are your best clients? Like, what builds did they want? Why did they actually want them? Were there any specific fears and objections that they had? Did they have certain careers? Did they have a family? Did they not have a family? Like, there, you can go pretty deep into this and honestly pretty quickly figure out who you actually want to serve or who the best clients are if you haven't done this little exercise already, but highly recommended. After doing that research, I was able to figure out an attractive offer that would attract the specific ideal client that I wanted to attract, right? So very important step right there. And the second step was to really create a landing page around this offer. And I'm not talking about a website, an actual landing page specifically made around just this offer, because websites are not optimal to use for advertising. The reason is because they're basically just for like information gathering, like basic information gathering, so people can see that you are like a real business. But I don't want people to click around on a bunch of buttons, where it says services and then there's another button that says about and then service area. Like, I don't want people to go around on this website and get distracted just to quote unquote gather information. I want them to convert. That's my only goal. I want them to convert. In other words, I want them to take the next step in the actual funnel, which is inquiring, booking an estimate. That is my only goal. And a landing page makes that easier because you actually have focus. It's just one offer, one idea, one button / call to action. It's very clear, simple, and straightforward. And so if we look at, for example, the landing page that me and my business partner have, it's, offer right here. And then there's a little bit more information. Here's a video sales letter, for example. And the only call to action is, book a call, or they can go to the ROI calculator and, plug in their own numbers to see how much they would actually make, like working with us, approximately, not 100% accurate, but sort of an estimation, right? And even on this page, it's, like book a call here, right? So there's no like, here's everything that we do, here's an about me section. All the information that they would need, at least to get them to book a call, is on this one page, right? It's on this one page. And so that just gives the page, again, focus. It's very clear. It's very straightforward, right? People don't need to click around everywhere. And again, one call to action, not two, not three, one, right? And so I had basically the same like structure for the landing page that I did for my client as I have with mine. And now once the landing page was actually done, it's time to drive some traffic to it, right? And we used 3 traffic sources. One traffic source was email list, like previous customers, etc., people who had potentially even opted in but didn't buy. We had at least their contact information and they had agreed to get emails sent to them. And then we also had cold ads, in other words, running meta ads, Facebook and Instagram ads to cold audiences, people who don't yet know of our business or our services. And then we also did retargeting ads. So diving into this, a lot of contractors actually have a couple of hundred or even 1,000 old customers on their email list. In other words, it's customers who already trust them and have already spent money. And so that means that they are the easiest to convert out of any group of people. And yet most contractors rarely communicate with their email list, but that's what we did. So we ran a 2-week email campaign to the existing email list, basically creating awareness, hype, and desire around this like promotion. It doesn't work to just send like 1 email per month, especially not if you're doing some type of launch, because a lot of people won't even like open the email. A lot of people won't even read the email fully. And so you don't create any awareness that way. When you're doing some type of launch or like a campaign, you kind of need to hammer people a little bit. And that's basically just to make sure that everyone who is on your list, everyone who is in your audience is aware that this is happening, that something is going on. I remember, for example, if you know Alex Hermosi, you probably do, when he did one of his book launches, right? He's one of the biggest like personal brands in the entire world. And when he did his book, he was hammering people with content, hammering people with ads, etc. for like weeks. And he was still meeting people in person who like walked up to him and be like, hey, I'm a big fan, And Alex asked them like, oh, are you coming for like the book launch? And the person was like, what book launch? Like, what are you talking about? And Alex made this point. People don't know that you exist or what you have going on. Way fewer people than you probably think. And this is why the volume is so important, right? And so we basically adopted that same kind of philosophy, if you want to call it that. And then we also ran some, again, Facebook retargeting ads. And so instead of just going to cold traffic, people who don't know us, we targeted specifically people who were in our existing audience and even people on the actual email list. And so if you run Facebook ads, for example, you can create these custom audiences of like your followers, your email list subscribers, etc. And you can, target those people specifically with your ads. And so we targeted people who are already following, for example, the Instagram and Facebook account, but even people who had like consumed content in the past like 3 months, right? If they had consumed our content in the past 3 months, then we added them to the audience, right? Because I still consider that kind of warm traffic, like they've seen stuff from us in the past, right? So they're more likely, probably, at least in some cases, to convert than, for example, someone who hasn't seen any content yet, right? And yeah, again, the client had a lot of followers on social media. And so if you can target them with your ads, then it's going to be way cheaper than going only to cold, because your followers know who you are and what you are about. And so cost per sale, cost per appointment, and even the CPMs will just be way lower. We also had a campaign targeting cold traffic to reach new audiences as well, but we put a lot of focus into our existing audience and people who had already consumed our stuff, because oftentimes there is more juice to squeeze there than people think. A lot of juice to squeeze, in fact. Now, here are the mistakes that I could have avoided to get even better results for this business. First of all, I needed to qualify better before letting people book a call. You see, we did get some calls that were just completely useless because I was focused on volume over quality. And so what I would have done now is ask more qualification questions before letting people schedule their appointment, right? And this is just to, again, make sure that we are spending our time with the right people and not the wrong people. If people are going to get, like if the sales team or you guys are going to get flooded with bad calls, etc., then that takes away the time that you could be spending talking with the right people. Now, the second mistake here was not having a back-end selling system. And there's been a little error here in my presentation. The qualification questions that I would ask would be, where they live, like what do they need help with, and are they in a place where they can actually invest money, right? And that's something that you should do before letting people actually book an estimate, or at least request one. Like, you need to qualify them before driving out there, because you can find out a lot with just a few questions. And if they don't even fill out the questions or like give their answers, then they probably weren't that serious to actually begin with. Like, they probably had low intent. Now, going into the actual second mistake here, I didn't have a back-end selling system. You see, when people schedule a call or request an estimate, they mostly do it kind of out of curiosity, and they're not fully bought into like your solution or your business, especially when you advertise to cold traffic. So when someone books an estimate, opts in, what you need to do is bombard them with content between the time that they book and the time that you show up at their door. And this is to warm them up and pre-frame them for the actual conversation. And so you could send automated emails that, for example, handle objections, shift certain beliefs, and show like case studies. And this is going to make sure that they go into the conversation that they're going to have with you at their home with more trust, more conviction, which ultimately leads to shorter sales cycles and higher close rates. But I didn't have this back-end selling system for the campaign that I ran for this client, which was a big mistake. Now, the third mistake was the offer wasn't actually super attractive. It wasn't attractive enough, I would say. It was okay for the hottest traffic, meaning if people already had a lot of trust in my client, maybe they had been following the business for a very long time, etc., then the offer would pretty easily sell. But at that point, they're not actually buying because of the offer, they're buying because of the actual client, right? But the thing is that most people are naturally going to be a little bit more skeptical and harder to nudge over the edge, at least when you want to scale and get a lot of sales. And I should have compensated for that with making a more attractive offer. Like, I could have, for example, had a risk reversal, a more clear timeline on the like results and stuff, and that just would have made it way more attractive. And the thing is that I actually thought about this back then too, but the reason I didn't make it more attractive was because it would have required like more conversations with the client and potentially even making tweaks to the service itself. And I didn't want to spend all the time or have him do it either. But looking back, it would have been worth it because he would have gotten way better results, not only in the short term for this launch, but also in the long term. And so the lesson there is like not trading the short-term gains for the long-term pain. I saved a little bit of time and a little bit of effort, or we did as a business, but I'm regretting that now because I would have gotten way better results. Now, hope that was valuable to you. And if you want to work with me to book more high-end jobs, then you can click the link in the description to book a call with me and we'll chat through it. Talk soon.